I figured it might be a good idea to talk about character power today. This is our time to create a not a tier list. Before we go into our World Tour finals this weekend, I think everybody still thinks that Happy Chaos and Leo are like the two biggest survivors. It feels like every version of the game these two characters have been in, they have been really good. Especially if you focus on tournament play. I think these two characters are good examples of two different two different things that happen in tournament. Leo is a character that's way more durable. His matchup strategy and like how he wins is very consistent. Every game, Leo has good offense, has easy access to his win condition by knocking you down, landing a flash kick, like all these ways to get good pressure, whether it's just like close slash, medium pressure, strike throw, or getting back turn pressure, which is you got to react or guess and then getting cooked. Like he very consistently puts you in his most winning position. He's much easier to play, especially in long-term environments in tournament, than I think Happy Chaos, where Happy Chaos is like, his power level is extremely high, but you mess stuff up a lot. They run out of concentration, they run out of bullets, they get hit on defense, and this character's defense, although his buttons on defense are pretty solid, no invincible reversal, whereas Leo, defensively, incredible, right? He has so much good stuff to do on defense, which is pretty important in a game like this where you can just get smoked. The Happy Chaos players, when they're like fucking plugged in, you got them a triple espresso and like their hands are nice and ready and they're playing nice and prepared, like you can't beat them. But then when the day is going on and there's no coffee left and somebody misses your Starbucks order, it's over, right? Like it's that kind of character. After that, it's really interesting because I think Ram and Nago are the typical slot-ins that people have. But there's also an argument, and some people even have her in the beginning for May in this version. She has so many good buffs and tools in this version. The big one, I think, is how powerful her RPS is post-Dolphin and how high her damage is in like so many interactions where the risk for her is not that big. But if you get hit, you absolutely explode. She has extremely good buttons in mid-range. They counter hit Dolphin and like her command grab combos and that kind of stuff now. That stuff is nasty. Her corner carry is ridiculous. She can stay burst safe a lot of times. Really consistent damage off of risk reward that is pretty skewed in her favor most of the time. And she's got some good matchups against some strong characters. The thing for May though, is that a lot of her strength comes down to like, she do big number when she hit you. I don't know if I value that as high as maybe everybody else, but I think she is one of the best characters in the game. These two characters, I think everybody knows why they're strong. The nerfs to the both of them, I think, are more impactful than people thought. You know, when like the patch comes out and everybody's like, dude, Ram's the same. Like some of the changes she's got have been pretty big. Not getting a safe jump every time she hits Rekka and having to do Daro or whatever, that is way worse. Like you build less meter, you get less buttons on block and stuff before they have to do anything. You're not safe jumping them. You don't get as much corner carry. Like that really hurts all of her conversions and confirms. It makes them worse. It's very noticeable. Same thing with Nago. Even though the characters are both still really strong, their nerfs are far more noticeable than I think people let on. Chipp, still the same. I think he was really scary in the last version, and I think he's among those characters again. He's a little scary to play in tournament because of how spooky his life is. But despite that, his toolset is extremely good. His buffs are just like, they're really good quality of life. He's got lots of good changes. His neutral game is like almost best in class, right? In the sense that he's so fast, really consistently whip punishes everything you do. You swing at him and you just feel like an idiot every time you hit a button. He still has issues with characters who can disrespect after some of his pressure. But I think overall, Chipp players have gotten good at minimizing that by using lots of dash blocking, dash 2Ks, and stuff like that to approach. And in general, I think it's still one of the best characters. Also up there is Jacko. Her big problem is Happy Chaos, but in general, most of her matchups are far more playable. The big advantage she has, and I think this is why you see her do so well in tournament, when you fight against her, you have to play her game. From round start, Jacko is like, okay, I'm pulling minions and throwing them. And like now you have to interact with that. And if you're incorrect on any minion toss scenario and you get hit by a minion, or if you lose some interactions against her in neutral trying to hit the minions, your spacing's not quite right. You get knocked down, then she runs up and gets some sandwich pressure, and then she does some throws, and then she sets some minions, and then you're in the corner, she does the super, you get exploded. Like it, you know, it could very quickly snowball. And most of the time, there's no pressure on her to do stuff. It's on you to respond. And so it's far more likely that you make a mistake than she does. But yeah, I mean, her biggest weaknesses are characters like Happy Chaos who just don't care about what she wants to do. She has a pretty specific kind of archetype And if your character is good at negating the minions and not letting her get going, she is not nearly as scary, but that's not very many characters in the game who do it easily. Even then, she has extremely good normals and neutral to contest. Our far slash and 5H, 2K and 2D are actually all really solid. And her pressure in the corner is best in class. I think a lot of people have her arguably top 5. Super spooky, really good character in this version. And I think she's now worth the investment. Also, these 2 characters, extremely good in this version, right? Testament got lots of really good buffs to make pressure better. Not a common character though. I think Testament as an archetype is not a character that people tend to gravitate towards, like a more defensive mid-range character where you control the pace of the match through like your fireballs, your buttons. You're thinking about what your opponent's doing a lot and trying to interact with that. And I don't think this is a really popular archetype. Does have some bad matchups against some of the better characters in the game, which can be a problem, but is a very solid mid-range character. If you're looking for a character that's balanced and can control the pace of the match, most characters in the game that are not like Happy Chaos or like Axel have to sit there and think about what you're doing quite a lot. And you get to really do a lot of good stuff. And in the version, like the 2H change from Testament vacuums you in, extremely useful because it makes combo routing better. It also makes pressure better because H Grave Reaper is plus. Get the suction off 2H, H Grave Reaper, 2K, H Grave Reaper, 6H pressure, like far slash, fireball. Like you have all this stuff that's really good off of it. And Baiken too is same kind of power level that I talked about in the last version. Pretty well rounded, generally has to be the aggressor in most matchups. Most of the stuff she does is like direct interaction, RPSing with stuff or choosing options. And some of the characters that are better than her just like have more favorable situations like that or are not in as much of a risk when they do it. Same reason this character is, a lot of people thought like maybe Bridget's top 5 in this version. Bridget is what people like about fighting games for tournament play. A character with extremely dominant mid-range, really good buttons, good fireball, good movement in the air, and she's just low risk. People like Bridget because they don't want to think about what their opponent is doing when they run offense. You swing with your big normals and you win a neutral interaction, then you scoot in, get some yo-yo action, and then you get safe jump into 50-50 into another 50-50. And if either of those hits, it combos, it loops into itself and you get a knockdown. And if both of those 50-50s are wrong, you can still run the strike throw at the end of that pressure. And that's not accounting having meter to extend or anything like that, right? So every hit this character does leads to very safe, loopable 50-50s that are consistent knockdowns. Her big problems, and to me, while I'm not sure if I rate her as high as some people, I think she's one of the better characters in the game, but her damage is quite low. And interaction on interaction, if you and your opponent are right the same amount of times, Bridget's gonna die way faster. The way a lot of people play Bridget, safe, low damaging, loopable offense is very weak to just like RPSing. And like if you're right, you get 40% of her life. And if she's right, she hits you for 10%. And then you have to guess wrong 4 more times to be equivalent to that exchange. She also hits you a lot. She builds you a lot of bursts. She builds a lot of meter herself though. Most people think that she's one of the best characters. And she is, I think, a great tournament character. Having that kind of pressure for tournament play, there's a reason why this character is also one of the highest rated characters for most people and does well in tournament, even though he has bad matchups. The character just hits you with their win condition and win. Zato, he can have problems in neutral with characters. He can have problems on defense with his health, with his ability to escape, his jump, which can be a strength in neutral, but it can be a liability on defense. He has a floaty jump. When he gets going, I mean, he has best in class offense. He can just hit you and then win the game at any time. Doesn't matter what character you are. Even if he's not better than like 3 or 4 or 5 other characters or 6 or whatever characters ahead of him, he is just a really solid, consistent character when he gets going. Similar to Jacko, he forces you over and over and over to interact with Eddie. And if you are wrong, you probably lost the round. If you're right, if you hit Eddie, yes, I got Eddie, I tagged him, and then he goes, oh, blah, 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 and he fucking resummons Eddie again. I killed Eddie 0.03 seconds ago. Why the fuck is he back? And he's already over there clapping. He has good evasiveness and neutral and like good tools to like fight you. So even if you kill Eddie, he only has to survive for like a second and then he's back. He's much better in tournament IMO than he is on like a character power list. And the reason is he fucking kills you. This dude just puts you in a bad spot and makes you guess and deal with what he has to do better than most of the characters in the game. And if you hit that position in tournament more times than bad things happen to you, you're gonna win with this character. That's just how he is. Around this position, I think a lot of people have Goldlewis. As a Goldlewis player, his nerf is like pretty big, the drone change. But I don't really think that matters that much for him. I think the bigger problem why Goldlewis is considered weaker in this version is just buffs to other characters. He's good in this version. He's like very solid, very well-rounded still. He's been pretty good in every patch. He's never really been a bad character. He has some bad matchups against some of the strong characters. Particularly Leo and Chipp are like the two in tournament that I think can give him the most trouble. But in general, a pretty solid character. Those are like the characters that everybody thinks of as like the super strong, you see these characters all the time, like the characters. I think Geo is probably around here too. Maybe slightly better than Goldlewis and Zato. Very, very good in this version. Better combo routes, a little bit more consistent, a little bit better at making her opportunities feel harder to deal with. Still, dashing pressure is like ridiculously good. It's like so strong. The changes to being able to do like close slash 2H into flip and loop them and break the wall, her 5H wall bounce, or being able to like end them with close slash OTG and doing safe jumps and stuff is extremely strong. I mean, you'll see her, I'm sure, at the finals. TY will probably play both Geo and Chipp, I'm guessing. You'll see both. The next set of characters, I think the first one to talk about is Axel. A really, really, really good example of a character who is not the most powerful, but is a great tournament character. This motherfucker gets the job done in tournament. And the reason is you have to play his game. More than almost any other character, you have to deal with all his zoning, you have to deal with his buttons, you have to chase him the whole time. And his damage and reward while you chase him got better in this version, which really helps. It's an archetype that's better in tournament. It's a little safer. He forces you to fight him in his space all the time. Every character has to think about what Axel's doing all the time, and as Axel, you know, you're playing your game as usual. He got lots of good buffs in this version. The rainwater buff is super, super sick. He has issues, of course, like his damage is pretty good off some hits, but on some things it's pretty small. And he's weak to characters with good mobility who can just like dash block at him all day. He also has problems if you hit him. His life is super bad, but yeah, generally pretty solid character. The next one is that I would talk about is probably Faust, actually. Pretty solid in this version of the game. He has like better mid-range. He has better conversions. His jump 2K, mix is much more consistent. His damage from anti-airs is some of the best reward in the game, particularly off 5K, right? Like if he hits you with 5K. Teleport PRC is one of the best moves in the game. His 6P is humongous. It's like a ridiculously large move. His 2S is also situationally very strong anti-air. His 2K, also situationally very strong anti-air. Generally though, he has some inconsistency issues still, I think, and his frame data, particularly if you just dash block him, is not great if characters have fast movement. It's very hard for him to deal with. He can explode on defense even with crawl, but his items are all pretty solid in this version. He controls space much better. People memed about how bad his items were for a long time, which I don't buy it. I think people were just bad at playing around them for the most part. And they've also gotten buffed, which helps. But people are much better about playing around his items, and a lot of the stuff he does makes you jump, and his anti-airs are super good. Millia also is a character that like has not been incredibly strong in most versions of this game. Pretty solid in this version of the game. Good movement. Her grounded confirms especially are like pretty solid in this version, and they've gotten better with a lot of the Kara stuff that she has gotten, which helps a little bit. Super confirms are good. Her error stuff is like very useful. Her new mix-ups and the new unslumping from the wall because of the pass-through, I think is really interesting and good. Like she still has some problems with her reward and her health, but overall I think is a pretty improved character. I think her bigger problem is not necessarily her, but the matchups. I think like heavy characters like these two and this one can be pretty bad if you run into these characters in tournament a lot, and they're pretty common. This can be tough too, I think, right? And then Sol and Kai both pretty similar in power level. You know, Sol is like, he's old faithful. You can't really discount him as a tournament character ever, and he'll always be good at the very least. I don't think this character can be bad. His risk reward and consistency when he's near you is too scary. He has extremely good screen closing, like he can close the distance really fast. Dash far slash is really hard to get away from. His 2S is ridiculously good. His 6S is still scary, even though they've nerfed it like 4 times. I think 6S as a move is solely the reason why he was the best character in the beginning. His knockdowns are extremely consistent. Safe jumps, consistent. His damage, extremely high. He has good return off everything he does. His large weaknesses are low profile. Loses to characters with really strong, high hitting 6Ps that can stuff a lot of the stuff he wants to do. And characters who do not allow him to engage in neutral and use his movement very well to create openings. Yeah, maybe instead of Kai there, maybe it's better to talk about Anji. I think Anji is also quite spooky in this version. Like if you think about old Anji, spin as a concept was never really that scary because Anji would spin and then he would hit you with like 2K2D butterfly. The 5H change made the reward for everything Anji does so much better. It feels so bad to get hit by Anji now. He does so much damage. They buffed his 2S. They made his far slash better. They made Fujin combo up more stuff. They made Fujin safer on block. They made the cancels better. They made Nagiha give you better Oki. They made 5H give you better reward. They made spin scarier because of that, which makes Fujin scarier because you're scared to spin. He gets real run up close slash Oki. His close slash is the best. It has so many active frames and people still don't know what to do about Fujin P. He's got a lot of good stuff. Kai too. The big thing about Kai to me is that he still dies off of his own offense, but his neutral is so much better. The patches to improve his fireballs, to make his 5H better, his 6H is an incredibly good move. He actually has lots of really good advantages in neutral, but the offense is still riskier than it is good most of the time. Compared to the rest of the cast, I think like if you look at it, it's just solid strike throw offense. Pretty good. Doesn't do anything too offensive or anything, but he doesn't have that many ways to take advantage of it in a way that's scary. You know, think about how many other characters can run strike throw and their reward or the risk that they take is better for them. Generally, Sol and Geo, if they hit you, have better reward, right? If Bridget's running pressure on you, Bridget's taking less risk, or like Happy Chaos, right? Or Jacko. He's not a character that I think has dramatic issue. But again, I think that that's one of his problems. Who does that leave us with? I haven't talked about Potemkin. I haven't talked about Ino, and I haven't talked about Sin. Ino has lots of really good stuff in this version. She's not a popular character in the West. I think she's probably better than most people will rate her, particularly because dive is extremely messed up in this version, but you kind of have to be an expert to use it in a way that is extremely dangerous. And like, unless you're one of the few people who really understands the movement, you probably can't take advantage of dive in the same way. It's why this character, Ino and Sol, are rated much higher in Asia. In Asia, they're like, dude, Ino and Sol are incredibly good. They think they're among some of the best characters in the game. The factor of how scary this character is when she gets near you. Stroke is better in this version in terms of the offense you get off of it. In terms of dive spacing and making dive kick actually a better whiff tool or better on block so she can pressure after, or better for her combos and extensions. Like, she is still quite a dangerous character. Potemkin, same problems I feel like as always. You just don't want him to do good stuff when he hits you with like close slash or Garuda. Just has some problems with consistency in his hits feeling good and getting consistent knockdowns and doing stuff. His lights I think are just not good. Like think about how good Happy Chaos hitting you with his light is compared to like Potemkin. His lights suck. And even the other heavies have much better lights. Even though he can just kill you in like 1 or 2 interactions, he generally doesn't feel that scary for most of the cast. I think they have good ways to deal with it. But in this kind of game, I don't think they want Potemkin to be that much better than he is. I think they're quite aware of the power level of this character and they do not want to push it that much higher. And then Sin as well. I think it's hard to rate Sin exactly because he's new, but I think most people think he is in the weaker class of characters. I think he was fine in the last patch before everybody got buffs. Most of the people I've seen have him in their like bottom 3 or 5 or something. I mean, I think it's largely they were a little afraid of his frame data being too belligerent. Like if this character, imagine a Beak Driver was like -8 or something, and like his 2S was like 11 or 10 or something, and like his far slash was like 11 or 12. Like if they make his frame data a little bit better on like those 3 core neutral moves, I think he's like probably so spooky. And they were just afraid he would be too dominant, but I think they dialed it back a little too much. Just think about his stuff and then compare him to like Ramlethal. Everything he does is like worse than what this character does, right? Everything. And it costs him resources to do it. Same thing, like Testament on release, again, they were afraid to make this character good. And then they gave this character lots of buffs, right? Baiken, they were worried, then they gave this character lots of buffs. Bridget, everybody complained in the beginning about the normals, the yo-yos have hurt boxes. Then they gave this character a bunch of buffs. Jacko, same thing, bunch of buffs. The only DLC that really hasn't gotten lots of buffs is like Happy Chaos because it came out and was the best. But he has just lots of quality of life issues. The frame data on hit on so many of his things is bad. 2K2D not reaching all the time for somebody whose 2D is like his main 10 frame poke. His backdash is just bad. And like a lot of it needs to click together. He needs like 6 minor things to work slightly better and he's like so much more functional as a character. But overall, I think even the characters that are on the weaker end, I think are pretty good in this version of the game. In fact, like watch Sol just win this weekend. Watch Mochi just cook everybody. Where in the West, people are like, Soul sucks. And like, Soul is a fucking terrifying character. Because the tournament for Strive is 2 Souls and like Skill. I don't know who Skill's playing exactly. He's played some Baiken, played some Kai. I'm guessing Soul and Baiken. There's Ram, Nago. I think Zato for Gobo, but he might play Goldlewis also. 1 Leo, 1 Happy Chaos, and then Geo/Chipp. My assumption for the game getting an update is probably that there will be a big update before Evo. My guess is that there will be an end of season 2 balance patch with the last character in May, because it'll be the end of the season, and then maybe we'll get another one for the beginning of season 3 or whatever. Who knows? They could announce a balance patch this weekend. They could be like, hey, we're gonna do a balance patch with this character or not. They could just choose to do it or not. Like, I don't know. It's up to them. Listen. Goldlewis actually doesn't really have problems with zoners. He has more problems with characters who can stick out hitboxes close to him and just smother him. Axel's not a problem because he's like a zoner. That match was fine. The same thing with Happy Chaos. Like the shooting, the zoning doesn't really matter for Goldlewis. The problems that Happy Chaos presents are good low profile moves and the pressure. It's not like he can't get in. His movement is actually very good. The big problem he has is like his weak defensive buttons generally.